into Brother Rafi close with his closing argument.
Yes, I like to say this. At some point, we're gonna have to get serious. You know, we take time out to celebrate the 4th of July. We take time out to celebrate the Labor Day. I mean, you would think that at some point we would have something of our own that we could reflect on. And this is the day of reflection, December the 18th. You know, all we could do is disagree with each other. But at some point we're gonna have to start to agree with each other and find some common ground and say this is what we have to do to make our neighborhoods, our communities, our culture better. You know, earlier today, I was talking to Brother McCoy, and I said, you know what the definition of clout is? Clout is power and influence. Until we can get to that point, we can't control anything in our neighborhoods. The police don't respect us. We have to be serious. This is a serious time. And this one, I guess, senator down in Alabama talking about the best times in his lifetime as far as family is concerned was time when he had slaves. This is serious. We're going to have to do something to make our lives better, make our people better, make our thought processes better. Yeah, you know, December the 18th is a very important day because it did give us some recourse. Without that recourse, nothing else is possible. Remember that, folks. It's not possible because did you ever hear of any slaves protesting, any slaves complaining? I mean, they had no rights to do that. We have that right today, simply because of the December the 18th, when the 13th Amendment went into effect, that was adopted in the Constitution. The Constitution is a document that gives you certain rights, and it's also called the bill. It's a Bill of Rights to the Constitution. So that 13th Amendment was very important. Don't let nobody fool you about this. This is important. And the day that we should reflect on, it should be December the 18th. And that day we should sit down with our family, make it a family affair. Sit down with our families and reflect on things such as our ancestors and how they was treated, and how we're being treated by the police, and what we're going to be doing tomorrow. This is important. So I want you folks to understand the importance of this day. It's profound. It's a day that will live in infamy. December the 18th, every year. It's only been 152 years since slavery. It's not ancient history, folks. So you have to think about this and be serious.
Brother Rob.
Thank you.
On that note, man,
We're going to start this off with a little lightweight, very, very brief history lesson. And we're going to talk about a day called the Day of Reflection.
Day of Reflection.
And that day was December the 18th. What was so important about the December the 18th? Well, it was a day that all the people who were held in captivity by law were freed by this government. Now, this was all brought about by the Civil War and Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was elected in 1860. The southern states was afraid that by him being elected, then that would usurp their rights and their privileges because they had people they called slaves. Now, with these, they didn't want the government interfering with this because they were making a lot of money and they had special privileges. You know, those people lived like gods, like kings. The black people could not argue with them. We couldn't protest. All we could do was just say yes, sir, and no, sir.
Yes, sir, no, sir.
Now, at the onslaught of the Civil War, the South seceded in 1860 and 1861 because Lincoln had been elected to the presidency. There was 11 states that seceded, and Lincoln primarily he started the war because he was trying to make these states not leave the Union, and the North emerged. The civil rights only to reunite the Union, not to free any slaves, not to end slavery. Now, during the slavery, they the North was fighting the North. I mean, the North was fighting the South, and the South was sort of winning. So Lincoln took it upon himself to sign an agreement or the Emancipation, a proclamation called the Emancipation Proclamation, and that was only to change the venue of the war because the North was losing. Now, the South was winning because they had free labor. So Lincoln felt that if he would end their slavery by signing the Emancipation Proclamation, was a war powers act, or an executive order. So that was signed in 1862, and he gave the South an ultimatum that if you don't rejoin the Union by January 1st, 1863, then he would pronounce their slaves forever free, in which case they declined. So therefore, the Emancipation Proclamation came into being. The Emancipation Proclamation did not actually free a single slave because it affected only areas under Confederate control. It excluded slaves in border states, such as Louisiana and Virginia. Now, he didn't want to lose those two states, so he had to sort of jockey around and fight the war, and therefore, towards the end of the war, in 1864, he decided that the Emancipation Proclamation would not hold up because it was nothing but a War Powers Act, an executive agreement. He felt that the Supreme Court would not honor it, so he had to come up with an idea called the 13th Amendment. He caught a lot of flack for that because there was a lot of people in his cabinet that didn't feel that slavery, that blacks were equal to white people. So he sort of did his political thing and persuaded the House. First of all, they needed 2/3 of the vote to pass the 13th Amendment. Then had to go to the Senate. It took a couple tries before it to go through the Senate. So he finally got it through. And what happened after he got it to be ratified, then it went into effect on December the 18th. Now, I sort of condensed that because of we don't have that much time to go through the whole onslaught of history. But that date was December the 18th that was declared that all blacks were forever free in the United States. And it was called the 13th Amendment. And it officially adopted into the Constitution 246 years after the first shipload of captive Africans landed at Jamestown, Virginia, and was bought as slaves. Just think about that now. This is in 1865.
1865.
And this is not ancient history. This is only 152 years ago. How many people do you know that might be 75 years old, 80 years old? There's only a couple of generations.
That's right.
Prior to that, it was we were enslaved people. We had no rights whatsoever. So that 13th Amendment was very important. And just as important, that day that every black person in the continental of the United States were free and forever free. Now, of course, a lot of people might say, well, we really wasn't free. But without that 13th Amendment, we couldn't fight nothing in courts. This was a constitutional act. We had to have that as the beginning of freedom. Now, of course, when they didn't really free us, really because they just let us go and they just turned us loose. But at least we still had that 13th Amendment to fall back on. This is why it was so important for the NAACP later on in 1908 to be able to fight injustices in the courts. because of the 13th Amendment. Without that amendment, nothing else could have been possible. Now, that was only after, it was 246 years after the first ship landed. That's not a long time either.
No, it's not.
But going back to 1865, that was only 152 years ago. So I think that that day, December the 18th, we should commemorate it every single year as black people. It's important to us and only us. And it's up to us to keep that date alive, because with that, we could fight through all the craziness that we're going through in our neighborhoods today, just simply by having some type of commemorative celebration every year on December the 18th. Very important.
Wow.
Now, this commemoration, the way I see it, my own personal view on that, we shouldn't beat drums, we shouldn't tap dance, we shouldn't make a lot of loud noises. We should sit down
Yes.
with our families and have a dinner and have a reflection. That's why I call it the day of reflection. And talk about the things we have done, things we should be doing, and things we're going to do. This is very important because every race have their own culture, have their own legacy. And therefore, I think this day is very important, and I think that it would serve us well. Not only that, but it could lead to bigger and better things, such as reparations. We don't have the culture that can manifest itself so that it could make us, give us more clout or more importance. So we have to manufacture our own selves. So therefore, I think December 18th is a good day for reflection. So I think I've said quite a bit here.
Yeah, you've said a lot. Yes.
And I think that day should live in infamy in our hearts and our minds, because our forefathers, the enslaved people, for 246 years suffered so much. It was such a horrible, horrific life that we led.
Lord have
Our
mercy.
ancestors
Ooh.
were just
Ooh.
beaten down to dust, as
Lord
some of the historians might say. We were made to feel like nothing and be nothing. So if I could take a couple of calls, and maybe I could.
I think that you want to say something? Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Are you aware? Are you aware that the 13th Amendment is basically the reason why the prison industrial complex takes place, because it says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as a punishment for crime. So that's why the crime is when you put the people in jail and they're basically slaves and you don't have to pay them anything. It's free labor. What's your opinion on that?
I am so glad you asked that question. Simply because you read the second half of that amendment. Let me read the whole amendment. Passed by Congress on January 31st, 1865, and ratified on December 6, 1865. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery in the United States and provides that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, that's the most important part, that it says here that neither slavery nor voluntary servitude except as a punishment. Now, without the first part, the second part wouldn't even exist. And I hear that's a big argument. Mm-hmm. A lot of black people who try to intellectualize on the 13th Amendment always look at that second part. Of course, they had other things too after the Civil War. They had peonage, which was a debt slavery. They had all sorts of black codes. But that first part, neither slavery, it abolished slavery in the United States and provides that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude. That's the most important part. So why would you want to throw out the baby with the bathwater?
We got 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah, but it's saying except as a punishment. So it's saying neither slavery nor involuntary servitude. But if
Correct.
it's a punishment for a crime where the person has been convicted, meaning they're convicted to jail,
Sure.
then it's okay to basically be a slave. Don't you agree with that they use
You're
that?
absolutely right. But on trumped up charges, frivolous charges, and things like that, they did do that. But without the first part of that, nothing else.
I get what you're saying.
For
I'm not
example,
disagreeing.
all right. We got 2 minutes. So
I got it.
all right. Okay.
for example, they had prostitution back in the day.
Mhm.
White women were prostitutes. They took black women anytime they wanted to. You follow me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So my point is, we had no rights.
I got you.
The first part of it gave us the right that somehow,
I got you.
up until the present day, we could use those things. It didn't happen instantly.
Right.
It had to manifest itself. Yeah, they had so many things. You had sharecropping. They had a lot of things going on. These people were serious about keeping us in captivity. They weren't playing. They were serious. So that first part of that 13th Amendment was very important to that point.
Mm-hmm.
To that point.
Yeah, I got you.
And you're right about the second point.